All right, so we've talked multiple times about starting pitchers now. Let's dive into the guys that you're going to be taking later on in your drafts. Let's talk about some closers, some relief pitchers, guys that really you don't need to prioritize at the very beginning, but people that are going to be a little bit more sporadic. And Michael, you're already talking about some of the strategy that goes into these relief pitchers in previous videos. But as always, if y'all are just now checking us out, guys, whatever I say this video, if you hear me say anything, don't listen to it. Just listen to Michael. Michael is the guy who knows what he is talking about. And Michael, why don't you go through and let them know where they can find other things that you discuss, regardless of if it's a podcast, if it's an article, if it's a website. Let's hear it.
Well, of course, rotofanatic.com. That's where you can get all your fantasy baseball needs met. No problemo. We got the Data Monster. It's a great statistical tool. It's going to help you win your league. Check it out. And hey, it's the Rico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast. It's part of the Rotofanatic Podcast Network. We're on Palazzo Podcast, Twitter, 2 L's, 2 Z's. Follow us, DM us, ask us questions. You can ask us anything you want at any given time. We love connecting with the audience. We have fun. We really do. We're goofy and silly, but we always bring knowledge and information to help you improve your team.
All right. Well, that's it, man. Let's get into this video. This is something that I think a lot of people have been waiting for because it's, I don't want to say one of the more difficult positions to draft, but the hit rates are just kind of all over the place and a little bit harder to predict. So do you want to go in with some relief pitchers, some closers that you were targeting at the end of your drafts?
Well, that's usually where I'll be targeting regardless. I don't, like I said in the first video we did, I don't want to be taking closers early. There's some people say, hey, Josh Hader and Liam Hendricks, these are the best of the best. And you're better off just sticking with those guys because it's such a mess in all the other bullpens around baseball. There might be some credence to that. There's a friend of mine named George Montanez, who's also an analyst, and he's a very smart guy. And that's his theory. He's like, take closers early. Micah Henry, another friend of mine who's an analyst, loves closers early. But I think there's plenty of closers to be had later in drafts. So that's what I do. I take chances later on. And I think you're just kind of playing pin the tail on the closer. That's what you're doing here, Mason. It's just a mess in a sense because we don't know who's going to emerge as a closer. So my guess, honestly, it's as good as some of yours. I'm not going to lie about that. But if you're asking me, I like guys later in the draft like Jonathan Hernandez of the Texas Rangers. Now, Jose Leclerc has kind of been the de facto closer, but he's also injured a lot. It's been a constant problem. He was injured again last year. Jonathan Hernandez got electric stuff, and he's in a prime position to maybe unseat Jose Leclerc, who also, since he was hurt last year, lost his job to Rafael Montero, who the Rangers shipped out to Seattle this offseason. So there's an opportunity, and Hernandez is available way down in drafts. I like him a lot. I think it's someone that everybody should be targeting because the Rangers, even if they're not that great, you can still get 30 saves on a team. And if Hernandez emerges as the guy, then you're going to be like, wow, that was tremendous value.
All right, man, I'm sorry to cut you off here, but let's go back, take a step back with just the overall strategy. Would you draw a parallel to how you draft defenses in fantasy football, where generally just because of they're so hard to predict and they're kind of matchup oriented that you are willing to wait till the very end? Is that kind of the same thing here, or am I just making something up?
I think that's a great point, Mason. You're throwing a dart on the dartboard at certain points, and sometimes a defense will hit and explode, and you'd be like, wow, look at me. I cashed in. I didn't have to take a defense in round 10 or 11 or whenever you decide to take one of the best defenses. This is exactly the same type of situation. You got elite closers at the top and then a bunch down there that could hit. And you got a couple of defenses at the top that are the best, and then a bunch that could hit. I think that's a very astute observation.
All right, well, let's go through. Let's go through more of those guys that you're just going to be picking up at volume and just hoping one of them actually takes over. And who would be your next guy?
Well, I'm in the Detroit area. I'm a Detroit Tigers fan, so I want to admit that freely. And Gregory Soto is a guy that came up last year, got a couple of saves, struggled a little bit, but Joe Hernandez was the apparent closer for a while, could not get the job done. He was awful. Gregory Soto throws at 98, 99 mile an hour fastball. It's got a little life to it. He's a simple kind of two-pitch pitcher in a sense, but he's your perfect reliever. And I think even if the Tigers aren't good, which is, very possible they won't be good, there's still saves to be had. And Gregory Soto is so deep down in drafts that people aren't even thinking about him. I don't think he's being drafted in 12-team leagues at all. But I love me some Gregory Soto, and that's just not Tiger bias. That's because he can produce for you.
So generally, are you willing to go with the guys that are projected to be on teams that don't have a great record if they're going to present value, or are you going with the crowd and just wanting the guys that are going to be on good teams that should rack up a lot of saves?
Oh, I don't care if a team's good or bad. It's a matter of opportunity. There's bad teams. Ken Giles on the Jays, when he was healthy, he got plenty of saves, and the Jays were not very good. There's always a historical record. You can check it, go back and look in the books or online. There's no books anymore. Check out teams that aren't good, but had closers who could give you 25, 30 saves. It's definitely something that happens. You don't have to have the Dodgers or the Padres or the White Sox, the best of the best teams. You don't need the closers on those teams to succeed. You just need to identify the guy who's going to be their focus in the ninth inning to get those 3 outs.
All right, well, let's go one last guy before we end it. Let's not focus on the guys at the top. Just like you were saying, we're going to go with the group of guys that are those dart throws. The last one.
All right, I'm going to give you 2 real quick. So Blake Trinan of the Dodgers, right now Kenley Jansen is the still heir apparent, but his velocity continues to dip and dip and dip. And Blake Trinan's had a season where he was absolutely incredible for the Oakland Athletics. It was a couple of years ago, but he's shown that he could be the guy and get you a bunch of saves. I would target Blake Trinan, take a flyer on him. And then in Kansas City is a team that's not going to be very good either, but they're going to be a little better than you might think. Everybody loves Josh Stomont. This is a guy who had a ridiculous K9 and came out blazing last year. But I actually think Jesse Hahn, the former starter, used to be a starter again for the Oakland Athletics once upon a time. Now he's a reliever. He came on last year, and I loved his curveball. I loved the production he got in a very limited sample. And I think Hahn could actually be the guy who rises to the top there, not Stomont or Scott Barlow. I think Hahn's the guy.
Awesome. Well, let's call that the video. Any last plugs that you want to get out there that people can find down in the description of the video?
Yeah, check out the hits. Rico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast. 2 L's, 2 Z's on Twitter, Palazzo Podcast. And of course, rotofanatic.com is the website where you can get all of the fantasy baseball information you need. Deep research articles, anything, rankings. We got it all just for you. So please check it out.